afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 239th meeting of the Lexington Veterans Association. I'm Linda Dixon, and we're very happy to see all of you here today. I forgot to ask Bill Stern in advance, Bill, but I'm sure you'd be happy to perform our ceremonial function. Would we all stand, please? We'll open with the Pledge of Allegiance of America, to the flag of America, led by Bill Stern.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we have to start today's program off on a very sad note. As you saw from the handout on your chairs, we've lost a good man. We told you last month that Bill Johansson was suffering from a completely sudden, shocking, unexpected illness. He went to Florida, had no idea that he was terminally ill, and he succumbed. And we wish to open the meeting with a tribute to Bill Johansson, who meant so much to this group. He was the founder, the leader, the pilot, the inspiration of this group for 20 and more years. And one of his closest friends and co-workers, and one of the rocks, anchors of this group, Ed Loturco, will offer the tribute.
Hi everybody. Obviously, as Linda just said, this has been a shock since day one. I took it on myself to basically do a small tribute to Bill today. This was a very large hit to obviously Sue, the wife, and Krista, the daughter. The good news for the daughter being there, she is a surgeon and physician, so she was a great help to Susan as they watched Bill slowly deteriorate. Roughly about a week ago is when he pretty much gave up on reading. He's reading typical military books, things like that, so he never gave up on looking for those types of things, to just hitting the bed and sleeping and never getting out for the past week and a half. He never ate from the point of January on, so he really lost an awful lot of weight. So they kind of watched this deterioration take place. As I mentioned, they had moved him at that point in time last month from hospice to their condo. The only reason for that was get him to eat. If we put him into what we all would be familiar with, our kitchens or our family rooms, whatever, maybe he'll eat. Well, he didn't. He would take a spoonful of food and that's it. And in most cases would spit it out. So the condition he had was multiple tumors, a very large tumor, just around the liver area, the bile duct, as it started. The good news, if you can ever say there's good news, he never suffered any pain. Mainly because that part of the body does not have nerves specifically leading into that side of the liver. So he really did not pass on because of pain. He just passed on because he ultimately went into a small coma and just passed away in his sleep. The way a lot of us, I think, would like to go is in our sleep. So this is my tribute to Bill Johansson. For many, it was such a shock to hear of Bill Johansson's passing. Cancer is a dreadful disease, and for many, it has taken them from us much too soon. Bill was a leader, had a contagious personality, and was a kind and compassionate person who did so much for others. He has been a great friend to so many and had a special magnetism to draw one into the LVA program. For his leadership of the Lexington Veterans Association, we will be ever thankful for having the opportunity to know him. His desire to have others tell their story has enlightened so many other veterans and guests at our monthly events. His legacy will live on with the LVA board members in seeing this program continue and grow. Bill was a veteran National Guard pilot and had a way about him to say hello, share military experiences that ultimately brought yet another speaker to our podium. His demeanor was always well received, and if the discussion became of interest to Bill, the invitation then followed to speak at one of our events. Ultimately, we all would be grateful for another excellent person to experience all due and simple hello and hand-firm shake from Bill. I don't know of any speaker we have had that didn't enjoy presenting their story and feel rewarded at the same time to tell it. The LVA speaker agenda now stretches out into the fall of 2017 because of Bill Johansson. There once again is that legacy, and we thank him for all those handshakes. The LVA past and present board members and friends will miss our leader, and may his legacy live on for years to come. Our prayers and thoughts continue to go out to his wife Susan and daughter Krista. As far as services, I've talked to Sue as of yesterday. They are planning to have a memorial service up here. She is hopefully coming back between the 20th and the 23rd of April. And at that time, she'll complete and firm up, which may even happen sooner. He was born and raised in Concord, and that's where the memorial service will be. We're looking at right now, ironically, the 9th of May and the 10th of May. The 9th of May is our next LVA meeting, so if anybody forgot, we'll be reminding you, leave here, go to Concord kind of thing. So that's when the memorial service will start, is on the 9th, and then a mass will happen on the next day. He was cremated down there, so we'll not see any casket or anything like that up here. That's pretty much the news as far as we know it. Krista has gone back to where she teaches medical school, and she'll be coming up on the 8th to spend the next couple of weeks. So if none of you have ever met either, here's your opportunity to see what was attached to a wonderful man like Bill Johansson. So I'll turn this back to Linda because I know she wants to kind of open this up a little bit.
Thank you. We're pretty sure, is this still on? Yeah, we're pretty sure there are some people in the audience who might want to say a couple of brief things, share a memory, just say a few things about Bill. Bill Stern has asked to start off and say a few words. We'd be very happy to welcome anyone who also would like to share some words with us. Bill.
Thank you, Linda. I had the pleasure of knowing Bill for another 20 years perhaps through the Lexington Veterans. During that period, he has earned my full respect, my full trust, and my full empathy. I would like to tell a very brief incident in which you may enjoy. In the January, I think it was, meeting of the board, I got up and said, last night, and this is true, I had a dream. I was at a national convention, and I nominated Bill Johansson for President of the United States. That's how much I felt about it. So at the meeting, I got up and said, last night I had a dream about I nominated Bill as President of the United States. And immediately, everybody at the board got up and said, I second the motion. That tells you a lot.
I'm Edith Flynn and represent my husband, Pat Flynn. He's one of the original founders along with Bill and two Bills and others. And we're having a medical emergency. You know, as we get older, we experience those things. But Pat is hanging in, and when we got the news of Bill's passing, it was one of the saddest days that we've had in a long, long time. I think Bill was incredibly inspirational. He had a strong personality. He could persuade anyone to develop the guts and come up here and do a presentation, as he did with me. And not only that, but also enjoy it. So he's going to be missed, terribly missed.
Okay. Thank you.
you, Linda.
We shall move on to our program. As always, thanks to Starbucks in Lexington Center. What would we do without coffee? We do appreciate it. Thanks so much to the volunteers for the delicious baked goods to go with the coffee. Thank you for your generosity in your donations in that straw basket on the table that keep our operating budget moving. If you're new to the group, if this is your first time with us, and you want to continue to receive emails and notices of our programs, we have an email sign-up sheet on the clipboard on the table against the wall. Please just give us your name and email address, and it will be our pleasure to add you to our database. Also, you'll notice, and it's overflowing, this is wonderful, the blue box on the table with the Bedford VA label will hold all of your greeting cards, magazines, what else do we have in there? Calendars, that's it. And Pat Costello is here, and she will take them right down the street to the Bedford VA. And thank you very much. It's a really welcome gift for the veterans. Right, oh, thank you, Ed. Oh, he's put up a slide. So the other thing is this member survey. I'll get out of the way. Last month we introduced a member survey, and we've had about 40 to 45 responses, which is great, but it's not enough. The information we're gathering is terrific. It's terrifically useful. And we really would like to have a lot more surveys than 41. I have some blank copies here, hard copy, so if any of you have not filled it out, you can raise your hand and maybe we can have a volunteer hand you a sheet. You can fill it out before you leave. If you go to our website, there'll be a link to the survey right there, and we may even send you a reminder email this week. It's easy to fill out, and it asks you, we don't even, what I said last month, we don't even know which of you were in the Navy or the Army or the Air Force. We just know a lot of you are veterans. Some of you aren't veterans. We don't know what job you had in the military, what skills you have. We don't know which programs you liked or didn't like, or what you'd like to see more of, or whether you have a future program that you'd love to present. These are useful things for us to know. So the survey would be very helpful. 2 people filled out a survey last month, but I think they didn't realize there was a second page. They only filled out the first page. So if you happen to be in the room, I'd love it if you'd fill out the second page. The first person was in the Navy, served from 1970 to 73 in the West Coast, East Coast, and Key West, Florida, on submarine duty, civil engineering, Seabees. Does that ring a bell? Is that person here? Okay. The second person filled out the whole survey. And when it came to name, said, "You already have it." Well, that's good, but we need to match up the data with the names. So if this person is in the room, Air Force, served at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base from 1957 to 1959, communication systems testing and development. Well, we'll try to find you at a later time. Okay. So we have your name. All right. That's it for business. Now, oh, yes, Ed.
Just one, everybody. I want you to know what you have on your chairs was the interview that Linda did with Bill. So give her all the credit in the world for that opportunity, because we do not have that information.
So now, as you may have not put this all together, but April, of course, Lexington goes mad for Patriots Day in April. And the Lexington veterans always try to do a program on colonial revolutionary Lexington. And we are not disappointing you this year. Our program this year is all about the historic, world-famous Lexington Minutemen. And here to tell us about it is the captain commanding of the Lexington Minutemen, Barry Cunha. Now, Barry, some years ago, was standing at Hastings Park watching the Lexington Minutemen go through a ceremonial routine. And he was standing next to a friend and said, gee, I think I'd like to be a part of that. Well, the friend happened to be a Minuteman. And according to Barry, the next thing he knew, here he was a Minuteman. And that was a long time ago, and he's loved every minute of ever since. And as he will tell you, the Minutemen are known around the world. They are the second oldest active military unit in the world. Huh? Am I right? Yes.
Western world, yeah.
In the Western world, okay. They have both a ceremonial mission, meaning marching in parades, and they have a mission to reenact historic battles. They have marched in presidential inaugurations. They even have a town square named after them in France. So they are a far cry from just little old Lexington's pride. Each Minuteman takes on the identity of an actual Minuteman who lived and fought on the Lexington Green. And you'll hear a lot more about it from Barry. Now, when he's not wearing his I won't tell whose uniform it is. When he's not wearing his dress uniform, Barry runs a very prosperous dental practice here in Lexington. He got his start in dentistry courtesy of the U.S. Air Force. He was an Air Force dentist for several years, 3 years, and then went into the reserves for close to 20 years, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. He graduated from Tufts University and then got his dental degree from Howard University Dental School. And for many years, he has traveled on humanitarian missions to Central America and South America, providing free dental care to children in, I would imagine, remote villages, year after year, which is just an amazing thing to do. So, let's hear all about the Minutemen exactly 7 days before the festivities begin. Let's give a big welcome to Barry Cunha.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. Just before we start, I want to say that I did not know Bill well, but I did know him, and especially knew his wife, Susan. She's been my travel agent for years and years and years, and has planned some wonderful trips for myself, my wife, and a lot of our friends. Bill actually painted our office in Lexington many, many years ago after he was retired. So I agree with all of you because I know the family extremely well, and he will be missed. I'm also glad to see that you do the Pledge of Allegiance before every meeting. We do that we do the same thing at our meetings before monthly at the Minutemen meetings as well. I'm going to kind of answer one main question, but I do want to warn you, I do not have a PowerPoint. And I do not want to be monotonous and go on and on and on and bore you to death. So I encourage you to ask questions, stop me at any time. I do have a few photographs which I'm going to have some comments on, but when I was putting together a PowerPoint presentation, it didn't really fit with the topic that I was going to discuss. I have a lot of modern photos and some old prints and things like that, but I didn't really have a good sense of what to put on there. And I just didn't want to put words on the slide. That doesn't tend to work that well.
Picture of your new grandchild would have been.
Oh, I should have done that. I should have done that. Yes, and I have a new grandfather, about 10 days old now. Thank you, Bruce, for pointing that out. So the question I want to, again, please ask questions. I can't promise you I can answer them. I'm going to be the first one to tell you I'm not a historian. I have picked up a lot of this knowledge from doing research on my character and just from being kind of osmosis, being a member of the company since 1991. We have several very, very good historians within our company. Many of you know Sam Dorn, kind of the quote-unquote unofficial historian for Lexington, Bill Poole, Alex Kane, Bill Rose, and most of the information that I'm giving you today has come from research that they have done, so I want to give them credit for a lot of the information I'm going to give you today. The question I want to answer then is who are we? Who are the Lexington Minutemen, and how did we get here? First, let me just state our mission. And the purpose of the Lexington Minutemen is that of establishing and maintaining a place or places for social and patriotic meetings and recreation, of encouraging and promoting patriotism, of assisting in the proper observances of patriotic holidays in Lexington and elsewhere, and of fostering and extending the ideals of the revolutionary periods as exemplified by the original Minutemen. Now, this is the purpose as stated in our bylaws, but as I will point out to you today, there's a lot more to the story. We were originally referred in 1775, actually, as not the Lexington Minutemen. I'm going to give you an idea about when we were actually officially called Lexington Minutemen, but it was not until many, many years later. According to depositions, we were known either as the Lexington Training Band, the Lexington Militia, or Captain Parker's Company. And you got to find all three. The town referred to us as the Lexington Training Band, and the soldiers in it as training soldiers. It was also, and it's interesting with a group like this and myself, with two different companies. There was the Lexington Training Band, and there was the Lexington Alarm. And the Lexington Alarm was made up of any man over 60 years of age. And they served as the reserves to the Lexington Training Band at the time. So I feel a certain affinity for them now, the alarm company. We give out a brochure at almost every event that we go to, because as you say, part of our mission is to promote the history of our company, and from every generation we want to tell our story. I just want to read a couple of things in the brochure that we talk about. As Linda said, we're the oldest existing Minutemen company in the continuous existence, and the second oldest military organization in the Western world. Anybody know who the first is?
Ancient Honorables.
Very good, Ancient Honorables. And they played a very important part in the development, in the initiation or the birth of our company. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well. The members joined together to form an organization dedicated to increasing knowledge and understanding of our country's birth. Through school visits, reenactments, speaking engagements, the Lexington Minutemen keep alive the memory of our country's foundings. Whether we're outfitted in the buff and blue, as we call it, or our authentic colonial garb, we are emissaries that are able to explain a piece of history that goes beyond that taught in classrooms or national media. Members research the characters they are assigned to portray, oftentimes spending untold hours in the pursuit of the smallest detail. And that's important. That's what really separates us from any other Revolutionary War reenactment country that you're going to come upon. We're the only ones that actually do portray an actual character. And the research is extensive, I can tell you. People have actually gone down to the National Library in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, the internet doesn't really help at all. We were hoping that we could get a lot of information there, but the research goes extensive. Many of them go to the hometowns of where these Minutemen were buried. They dig up and find where their graves are. They take pictures of them. They look in the archives. They go to the churches. So we do extensive research, and you're welcome to look at that research. It is on our website. You can just go to LexingtonMinutemen.com and go to character portrayals, and you'll see the outlines of the ones we've put together. Our Minuteman Oath is one that was stated back in 1775 and is still repeated by every new member that enters the company at this time. And I just want to read that to you now. The oath goes, "We trust in God that should the state of our affairs require it, we shall be ready to sacrifice our estates and everything dear in life, yea, in life itself, in support of the common cause. Now, of course, we point out to the members that we don't expect them to sacrifice their lives, but we do want them to know that this was an important oath and that they carry that with them when they portray the individual that they are representing. Also, does anybody know where the slogan on our flag comes from? What a glorious morning for America. Who spoke those words?
Sam Adams,
Sam Adams. Okay, you know when?
on the way to Woburn.
He spoke it on the evening of April 18th. Could have been early morning, April 19th, when he knew that the militia was on their way heading into Lexington. Yeah. So, and also, I think I want to point out one thing that a lot of people, I still get this all over the world. You know, when I'm in Mississippi, it gets me. It's all about the Civil War. When I'm in Texas, it's all about the Alamo. You know, and I traveled these different places in the military. And it just used to really irk me, because I would mention the name Lexington, and immediately they'd say, oh yeah, Lexington, Kentucky. I'd say, really? Like Lexington, Virginia. And I'd say, you know, they got their names because they were honoring our town. And so it's important that we keep that message going wherever we travel, that we let people know how important our heritage is here, and we pass that on to the generations to come. It just still bothers me. I just got to get that out. Now that I've gotten that out, I just want to give you a brief outline of the history of our company. We have on our old hat 1713, because as many of you know, that was the incorporation of the town, which we originally called Cambridge Farms. We actually have research now that gives our original formation of the company back as far as 1689. And I want to read you a little bit of the history of that. This is very recent, by the way. For 20 years, I was saying we were the 8th oldest military organization in the world because we thought we were 1713. And I thank Sam Dorn mostly for this research that he did on this. And it has been verified by the Centennial Legion. Okay, so this is now, we have to redo all of our dates on all of our hats and things like that. At the beginning, anybody know what the territory was called in the very beginning here? We were called Vine Brook. Obviously, that's because the Vine Brook that still goes through it was named for the body of water that flows there and the fox grapes that grew along its banks. It was by those banks that the first house was built by Benjamin Muzzy. A lot of these names I'm going to tell you are going to ring bells in your mind. The town of Cambridge, which was originally included Lexington and included up as far as Lowell, was a very large town. But as the town proper grew, crowded down by Cambridge Common, the wealthier inhabitants bought land at the farms for hay and crops. Some of their children then built houses out there, and sort of as a frontier. And eventually we ended up with 30 families known as the farmers here in 1682. And it was in 1682 that the farmers petitioned the general court to be made their own parish. All still part of Cambridge, but empowered to build their own church and hire a minister. Basically, they were tired of trucking through the mud and muck and rain all those miles to go to church and fulfill their spiritual requirements every year. Well, that petition didn't go anywhere at first, and until 1691, but it set the stage for our origins. The farmers had done their compulsory service in the Cambridge Militia Company, and the training was on Cambridge Common. And just as the churchgoers grew tired of the long haul, so did the soldiers, because all of the musters, again, were many, many miles away.
A question of compulsory.
Sure.
Compulsory from the king?
16 to 60. It was compulsory service from 16 to 60.
From the king.
From the king at that time, yes. Well, that's an important point, because the next part I'm going to tell you about is why it changed. Where did the militia companies change from being that as part of the king to being that against Parliament, pretty much per se. And that was in the 1680s. Charles II revoked the colonial charter of Massachusetts Bay. That was 1684. He died the following year, and James II took over. James further imposed on the colonists. He believed in absolute rule, and that he could do with his subjects whatever he wished. Massachusetts Bay had always elected its own officials. James put an end to this by establishing the Dominion of New England in 1686. All the previously independent New England colonies were merged under the Dominion, and the governor was appointed by the Crown rather than selected by the people. Basically, the colonists were stripped of their rights. So we think of 1775 as the first time the colonists got upset about this, and it goes much further back. Town meetings, the staple of New England democracy, were banned except for one annual meeting to elect its officers. Public discourse on issues of the day was suppressed because the hot button issue was anger toward Governor Andros and the Crown. There was also taxation without representation, although that term had not been coined yet. Taxes were levied without the approval of the general courts, unlawful searches of private property were conducted, and other violations of the Magna Carta rights. We had enough. Then came what's called the Glorious Revolution in England, with William and Mary taking the throne and an end to James II's absolute rule. News of this regime change reached Boston in early 1689, and in the morning of the 18th of April, interestingly enough, the local militia companies, led by the Ancient and Honorables, swarmed in Boston and seized Governor Andros, along with other royal officers and suspected sympathizers, such as all the Anglicans the militia could get their hands on. I would have loved to have been there for that. The governor was imprisoned and eventually sent back to England. Governor Bradstreet, better known as Anne's husband, who had been governor prior to the Dominion, resumed his control of Massachusetts Bay. This was the first revolution in Massachusetts, fighting for our Magna Carta rights. One historian later wrote, "For decades, Bostonians will remember what they did on the 18th of April, 1689. The slightest mention of Andros or the Dominion was enough to rally the people firmly to their traditional rights. For many years, politics in Boston hardened along the lines developed during the Dominion, and political leaders after 1689 were judged by the parts they did or did not play in 1689. And as late as 1776, Bostonians look back on the Glorious Revolution in 1689 not as a rebellion, but as a justified resistance against unlawful authority in defense of their traditional right of self-government. And it was out of this justified resistance that our company was born." So there it is, 1689, all of a sudden now, this company is formed to protect our rights. And with the knowledge that they may have to act with resistance, armed resistance, in order to defend our rights. So with the 1682 petition for a parish still pending, the farmers requested their own military company. Perhaps they were one of the thousands, members of the thousands who swarmed into Boston on 1689, we don't know. Perhaps they realized that with a conflict on the horizon, they needed to seriously discipline themselves. It would be difficult to train more frequently if they still had to go to Cambridge every time they drilled. They petitioned Massachusetts Governing Council, which was also acting as the colony's legislature, and that's important, during this intercharter period for a separate company of militia at Cambridge Farm, and it was granted in 3 steps. On the 19th of June, I quote, "Liberty is granted into the inhabitants of the upper farmers of Cambridge, next Concord, about 5 miles distance from their own town, to nominate a lieutenant and ensign, according to the direction of the order of this convention, to be presented for allowance and confirmation as in said order." So on 21st of June, 1689, David Fisk Sr. was nominated lieutenant of the soldiers of the Cambridge of Upper Farms, and Ephraim Winship, ensign, to be the said company of that company. A military company in Cambridge ordered that the soldiers of the Upper Farms of Cambridge, next Concord, about 5 miles distance from the town, shall be under the command of Lieutenant David Fisk and Ensign Winship. We are obliged to all duty as soldiers from time to time as occasion may be. And as I said, these records have been confirmed by the Centennial Legion historian as evidence of the Lexington Militia Company's first establishment. You wonder why we have a captain now. We received only a lieutenant and an ensign at the time because we were too small to have a captain. The first captain didn't come until much later. A little bit about Lieutenant Fisk. He was born in 1624 near Laxfield, Suffolk County, England, and immigrated to Massachusetts with his father when he was around 13 years old. The Fisk home is in Laxfield, still stands, partially surrounded by a moat. The family settled in Watertown, though David had moved to Cambridge Farms by 1647 when he was admitted as a freeman. David Fisk became a leader in the farms as one of the chosen few who signed the 1682 parish petition and one of the first selectmen once the parish was eventually granted in 1691. He lived on East Street. Worthing says it was built specifically as a path to Fisk's, and he's buried right next to us in the old burial ground. Ephraim Winship, our first ensign, lived at the top of today's Cliff Avenue in East Lexington on the land of his father, Edward. We know a lot more about his father, Edward. He was born in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, and he was a lieutenant in the Maine Cambridge Militia Company, and had earlier been a charter member of the Ancient and Honorables in 1638. Edward died in 1688, and we believe that he would have been responsible for training the farmers prior to the establishment of their own company. Now, the population of the farms continued to grow through 1699. By that time, we had a captain as our commanding officer. And in 1713, the parish was set off as its own town, Lexington. So, our unit was born out of a justified resistance in support of our Magna Carta rights. Following those roots, the company was revitalized from 1773 to 1774 upon the same sentiments that we were organized in 1689. New bylaws were drawn up, probably in October of 1774, and it became a volunteer unit. This is interesting because Captain Parker was elected on February 16, 1775, only 2 months before the Battle of Lexington. So he was a very, very new commander to the company at the time. I do want to go into a few important dates about our history, but I'll stop right there to answer any questions. Sure.
Captain Parker, did he have any military experience?
Yes, he did. He did. There was a few, that's interesting also, because if you think of the soldiers as farmers who just picked up their squirrel guns and went to fight the British and hid behind rocks and trees, and that you couldn't be further from the truth. Many of the soldiers in the company had fought in the French-Indian War. The character that I portrayed, Francis Brown, was a sergeant in the French-Indian War. They trained regularly on the common. Sometimes 2-3 times a week, and at times even more than that. At the time of this April 1775, we knew things were happening. We knew something was going to explode, and the training had been stepped up, and we were training a lot more frequently on the green. They were well-trained militia. They were using the same Crown Manual of 1764 that the British had used, and again, it was not. They did line firing just like the British. I know in movies they show them hiding behind rocks and just taking pot shots off them, and they couldn't have been further from the truth. Good question.
Has the Minuteman ever published something like what you just read around this time of year? Do you know?
We have had several people in our company that are authors that have published books about the Revolutionary War period.
I mean,
but
printed
not
in a free
specific.
newspaper.
Yeah, but not specifically about this, I don't think, Bruce.
Well, they've given some, given a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that I do read in there.
Yeah.
Maybe you should submit that.
Well, we get bits and pieces from all different sources. David Hackett Fisher, as a matter of fact, we took a lot of information from him. In fact, we gave him a hard time. He came to speak at our meeting, and there was a few irregularities in there that we blamed him on. One of them, he thought that the Minutemen were probably half drunk because they'd been in the tavern all night before the battle, which again, we have no indication. There's no records of that. I think when people hear the word tavern, they think bar, they think booze. And as you know, taverns were much more than that. They were really the nerve center of the town. That was the internet of the town, essentially. And I would very much doubt that late at night there was any alcohol served in the tavern. So we gave it to him. He said, well, he took a little bit of a literary license with that and put that in there. But yes.
Just to kind of put a little blessing on it, this is going to be on DVD in the library. So everybody still has access live to what we did.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. Any other questions? Yes.
Why is it that Concord so often gets the credit for the first shot and not?
Oh, because there was a guy who wrote a poem. What was his name?
Emerson.
Yeah. And that poem really is what brought him. Now, again, I'm not going to say that Concord wasn't very important. They were. That was the first engaged battle, really, of the Revolutionary War, where shots were fired really pretty much on both sides of the bridge at the time. So in that, all the militia companies had come together to fight them, and we drove them back to Boston. But when I hear the word shot heard around the world as being in Concord, again, I'm very quick to point out that no, that's not true.
It is maddening.
It is.
They're keeping it up.
It is, they do still keep it up, yeah. But we all know here that the first shot was shot right here in Lexington. We shot it in Lexington. Yes.
To go back to your comment a little earlier, you said that because of the experience that most of the Lexington Minutemen had in the French and Indian War, that they were fighting like the British, but in fact...
They were British.
Well, okay, that's right. But the whole concept of a circle of fire that all the Minutemen units were doing, and that they were firing in a guerrilla warfare type mode.
There was some of that. In fact, at Parker's Revenge, one of the things we do know about that is that he did tell them to take advantage of the rocks and houses and trees that are in that area. So I'm not saying that the guerrilla warfare was not used, but that was the exception rather than the rule. Okay. When they and again, the way back from Concord in Merriam's Corner, they actually set up in regular units to fire upon the British. That was not, but of course, many times it was just impossible to be able to set up as a unit. So guerrilla warfare was used at that time. But, I guess it's important to realize, though, that they were trained soldiers. They were trained in the way of the British Army. And so they knew the way that they engaged in battles, and they were used to that, and that's how they used that when possible. But you're absolutely right. They did take advantage of rocks and trees and things like that when they were wooded areas, and when the British were making their final retreat back to Boston. Yes?
Someone answered the question of who the first military unit in the Western world was, and I don't know what that was. It was...
Oh, the Ancient and Honorables.
What's that?
They're the official honor guard for the governor of Massachusetts.
Great, thank you.
Yes?
Skipping to today, is the company recognized by a government entity or
I'm going to go into that.
Yeah, do you serve at the will of the government?
We are recognized. We are recognized as an official military company, and I'm going to go into that in just a few minutes. Yeah, that's a good question.
Do you know who shot the first shot?
What was the question?
We all have our opinions about
What
that.
is yours?
Would you repeat it?
My opinion, the question was who fired the first shot. My opinion that it was probably fired by someone from the militia off the green. At the time that they were settling on the green, there were still lots of people that were coming in at that time. And I have a feeling that someone just saw what was happening on the green and got really ticked off and fired off a shot.
I've heard it was Solomon Brown from behind Buckman Tavern.
Well, if you see what we do on the green every year at the reenactment, we fire a shot from Buckman Tavern. And so that is one of the other opinions, that it was fired from the tavern. Another opinion was that one of the pistols went off from the King's troops. This was not the best well-trained groups. Many of these people that were in the British column at that time, this was their first military engagement. So a lot of them were raw recruits. He had to actually assemble them and get them from kind of going crazy a few times, get them in line and get them disciplined along the way. So we'll never know. I mean, we really will never know. But you can all have your own personal opinion. Yes, Capt?
I often get asked, where do the colonists get their rifles?
Good question. Two main sources. One is a British musket called the Brown Bess, and the other one is French, through the French Charleville. In fact, as many of you know, if it wasn't for the French, we'd probably all be speaking with an English accent right now. They provided us with most of the arms that we had for General Washington's army at the time. And there's really not much difference between the two. There's a little bit of difference in terms of the gauge of the barrel. British musket's a lot more difficult to clean, so I have a Charleville. But there were other. These were guns, by the way, and not rifles. That's an important distinction, because the rifling is when you have curls, and the accuracy of it then is very accurate. These were guns that were not rifled, and they were only good for about 100 yards, and really accurate for about 50. For two reasons. One is that the musket ball made of lead was not 100% perfectly round. And the second was that the barrel, it's smaller than the barrel, obviously. So when it came out, depending on how it was ricocheting off the barrel at the very end, sometimes it would come off at a little bit of a different angle. And that was for those two real reasons. There was a rifle in existence at that time. It was not present on the green. And if someone here may actually know what that is, it's called the, and I can't remember the name of it now. It was used out in the frontier.
Not the Kentucky rifle.
It was similar to the Kentucky rifle. It was the birth of the Kentucky rifle. A couple of the guys in our company actually have them. We're not allowed to use on the green, obviously, because none of them were on the green, but they were in existence at that time. So I don't want to say that the rifling was not in existence at that time. There was a couple of rifles that were in existence at the time, just on the battle.
So
Yes.
then later, as the French were supplying us, were there rifles there, or?
No, I don't think so. They were all Charleville. Muskets. As far as I'm concerned, again, I'm not an expert on this area, and someone may contradict me on this, but as far as I know, I do know that they sent over a lot of Charleville muskets. Yeah, in fact, that, I don't think people realize that. They gave so much support, they actually bankrupted the French government. And, you talk about their revolution, I mean, were we part of the reason why they had that glory, the revolution? They were bankrupt, and you know what happened then with the bankrupt French government? Possibly, But they were so much anti-British at the time, they've been fighting them for hundreds of years, that they bankrupted their nation essentially to defend ours. Yes?
Was the Brown Bess the first weapon with interchangeable parts?
That's a good question, and I have to admit, I don't know that. Maybe somebody here knows the answer to that. I don't know. Yeah, it could very well have been.
You just slid over a sentence. What is not allowed on the green about the...
Rifles, which has the rifling on the inside of the barrel, which makes it more accurate, makes the firing more accurate.
Guns are...
But guns, yeah. These are called smooth bore, and have the rifling inside. Any other questions? Okay. I'm just going to give a few important dates here. We know that the 19th of June, as I've talked about, 1689 was the beginning of the Cambridge Farms. We were reorganized in 1699 with the captain. We were redesignated on 31 March 1713 as the Lexington Militia Company. We were reorganized again in the fall of 1774 as a volunteer unit. And this was under the laws of the Massachusetts Provisional Congress with new bylaws, but still named the Lexington Militia Company. By 1768, the militia had become stagnant, and musters were nothing more than essentially drunken get-togethers at taverns, I hate to say it. Until someone once said, and this is a quote, "Our civil liberties are being trampled upon. This can't happen anymore." February 1775, Captain Parker assumed command from Thaddeus Bowman. And at that time, like I said, it's divided into two companies, the training band and the alarm company. It was consolidated into one unit in 1780. They joined what's called the Lexington Artillery Company, which had cannon. Interestingly enough, 1783 is the first day we celebrated April 19th. Before that, it was considered a day of mourning. And so we did not really celebrate the actual day until 1783. This uniform, okay, is really General Washington's uniform. It's not even the official colors of Lexington, okay, but it looks neat. And does anyone know how we finally adopted this as our uniform? In 1875, during the centennial, General Grant was scheduled to come to Lexington. And at the time, the Lexington militia had no really dress uniform. They only had what's called a colonial kit. And so it was decided at that time to adopt an official dress uniform, and that's how this came into being. They decided in order to honor General George Washington, that they would use his Virginia colors. These are the colors of Virginia, and came up with this uniform, which has changed very little since then. I will go through some changes with you, but basically the uniform itself, we have a pattern. The pattern dates way back, and we have one seamstress pretty much that makes all of our dress uniforms, and so they're pretty uniform as the uniform should be, obviously. So what was inactivated in 1876? It really became a social organization. In 1909 is when we came. Somebody asked the question, have we been officially recognized as an official company? Yes. In 1909, we consider that the birth of the modern Minuteman Company. In fact, the commander was the great-grandfather of one of our past captains, Bill DeLay. You may know the family. Bill, actually, I was the adjutant under Bill DeLay when he was the captain of the company. Some of the pictures I'm going to show you here have him opening 128, the opening 128. We were the honor guard for Queen Elizabeth, honor guard for Queen Philip. We were also the official honor guard for President Taft, and I've got some pictures to show you in there about that. He had his summer home in Beverly and adopted the Lexington Minutemen as his official honor guard. But you asked whether we're officially recognized. So in 1909, then Governor Evan Draper, not to be mentioned with the confused with the Mad Men Draper, and we were recognized as an independent and unattached military command. We were reorganized as a battalion with a major commanding. And in June of 1917, we were actually attached to the Massachusetts State Guard as Company H, 112th Infantry Regiment. We were relieved from that assignment in 1919 and resumed our designation as the Lexington Minutemen, reorganizing in 1920 as a company captain commanding. I'm just going to show you some of these photos because they're pretty neat. This is one taken from the green back in 1910 of the Lexington Minutemen Company. I wonder how many of you can recognize the angle that might be taken from. I don't know if you can see that well enough. Because I can't. I think this is the church without the steeple on it. And Mass Avenue is over here, and Harrington Avenue runs that way, but I can't quite tell. Anyone recognize this gentleman right here? That's Capt. Okay, this was taken at his private residence, or his summer residence in Beverly.
He was that out of diet at that time.
What's that?
He was that out of diet at that time.
Yes. Yeah, the girth is there, I'll tell you, that's for sure. And I have a couple of pictures of, this is the reopening of 128. This is the great-grandfather of one of our past captains that I was telling you about. And does anybody recognize which overpass this is on 128? I believe it's the Bedford Street. The Bedford Street overpass.
Do we know the people in those photos?
You know, I know this gentleman right here. That again is the great-grandfather of one of our past captains, Bill DeLay. Yes.
I didn't grow up in Lexington. When was 128?
It was 1953, 54, but it was dedicated. Ed actually was the one who finally told me that because I had two dates, 53 and 55. The actual dedication ceremonies were in 1955. So this would have been taken in 1955. Thank you, Ed, for giving me that information.
Completed.
I don't know if somebody's going to recognize this lady here. Again, it's hard to see. That's Queen Elizabeth when she was much younger.
Where?
Okay. And again, we tried to go through the years and name some of these people. I think Bob Merrigan is this. I think that's Bob Merrigan. Anybody know Bob Merrigan?
I know.
Okay, he was the one who started the reenactments up again in recognition of the bicentennial. Okay, and I believe that's Bob Merrigan there.
What was this date?
What's that? This, I don't know the year of this one. I think it was like. I don't really want to. I didn't want to tell you. I think it's late 50s, early 60s, I believe.
And where is that?
This was I think in Boston. Yeah, but we were the official honor guard, which I think really upset the ancient and honorables, I think, at the time. This again is just a photo taken in 1953. Okay. And people think we didn't do the reenactment of Paul Revere ride. Well, guess what? There's a very, very early reenactment of Paul Revere ride taken at the Hancock Clock Fest. And this, I think, is a very interesting photo. This was the centennial, or the bicentennial with Joe Ford.
Anybody remember that day?
Yeah.
He carried my younger daughter around the green. I'll never forget it.
Is that right? This is interesting because this is in 1949. You've all seen this. This is our memorial. This is the Minutemen Memorial. This is the clay depiction of it, and then this is the unveiling and the official unveiling and presentation of it. It's 1775.
What year was that?
What's that?
The official presentation?
I think it was also 1950, 51. Yeah. I wish they had some dates on these, but I don't have the dates on them. The only reason I know that is because I can still see the same. I know some of the faces in here, and I know when they were in the company.
Jumper Sandorn.
Yeah, exactly. I have some other photos here of more recent events. And there they are. Oh, all right. I don't think I put them away.
On the easel?
They are on the easel, right in my nose. This just gives you an idea of now of the modern company. These are two photos that were taken. And our captain at the time, I was showing you his great-grandfather. There's his great-grandson right there, Bill DeLay. At the time, I was the adjutant to him at that time. So these are just two photos. You can pass these around if you'd like to just kind of get an idea.
How many of them are there?
You know, our numbers vary really tremendously. We usually end up getting about 3 to 5 new recruits a year into the company. And probably 2 to 3 become more inactive every year. Okay? But I say more inactive, there may be periods where, for instance, there was a period in my life when my kids were in school and my kids were doing sports, but I was really pretty much inactive in the company for a period of about 4 or 5 years, and then come back. And that happens to a lot of people in the company. They'll be a little less active for a few years, and then they'll come back strong after that. Yes?
You said you all have to be somebody specific.
Well, no, we're assigned a character. Anybody can join the company.
Do you run out of characters?
Not yet. Not yet. Yes, Pat?
What's the new official number of the men who were on the green?
Oh, that's a good question, because, for many years it was, I think, 77. Yeah. And we added 3 new names, as Pat knows, several years ago, to make it 80. And we have about 3 to 4 more names that we're still doing further research on. And that's the important part. You need more than one corroborating piece of evidence to really go ahead and put that name on the green. My character was one that was added to the monument several years ago. And we have corroborating evidence, we have first-hand depositions that he was present on the green at that time.
And who was that?
Francis Brown. He was the sergeant in the company. And there was 2 others. Thaddeus Bowman, interestingly enough, was not on that monument at the beginning. We know he was the rider that warned Captain Parker that the Redcoats were on the road. So he was added as well. But stay tuned, because there may be 2 or 3 more names we'll be adding to the monument as the research continues.
When we watch the Patriots games on television, there's a selection of Minutemen from across the state. Are they real?
Actually, many of them are from our company.
Are they?
Yes, yes. In fact, I did that when they first started. That I was one of the people out in the field with them. It has become much more of a job. They expect you to be there every game and do the Revolution games as well. So there are a few of us that most of us can't give that kind of commitment. So it's made up of, I will tell you, many different militia companies. But yeah, I think everyone in there is a member of another company. Most of them are from Lexington. Most of them from our company. So we still make up the grand majority. We were the ones that first did it way back when. We were the only company that did it way back when. And then as it changed and evolved, it became, other companies became involved with it as well. Yeah. Yeah,
Did you get to see the whole game?
Yeah, it was the only good part about the whole thing. Because we were standing right down on the field, and the cheerleaders were right in the back of us. So that was the only good part about the whole game. But yes, you did get to see the whole game. They fed us. Other than that, there's not a lot of perks. But it was worth it just to see the game, to be honest with you. It was really a lot of fun. You mix with the crowd beforehand, and they want you to socialize a little bit before the game and after.
Was there a hierarchy system above the militia company so that you could got intelligence and also orders that?
Well, there was the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. There was a political organization, political hierarchy that was just like today. The civilian really is in charge, and the military takes their orders from them. So other than that, no, there was just militia companies throughout the area, throughout the town.
So when the alarm came, how did you trust it? Did it come from some authority?
It did. It came from, again, the Provincial Congress in Massachusetts. In fact, they met in a tavern, the Green Dragon Tavern. Many of you probably been there before. That's where the Sons of Liberty used to meet. And most of all the intelligence came out of that. Dr. Joseph Warren was a big part of that. Paul Revere was also part of that. So yes, they had spies also in the British ranks. Some of them even thought that one of the wives of one of the top commanders in Boston was a spy for the colonials. But that's actually a very, very good question. And that's one of the reasons why it was so amazing that on April 19th, so many militia companies actually did show up, because they had to be physically notified by rider. And as the riders went out and hit all these different towns, it was amazing that they were able to get that kind of response so quickly. Interesting, does anybody know one of the main towns around here that was not notified and so never showed up? Waltham. Waltham was never notified. His commander slept through the whole thing. Yeah, and they are still ruining that day yeah. Yes?
Could you say something about your uniform, namely what parts are functional, what parts are just decoration?
This pretty much is, and that's a good point, because there are people in the company that want to make this as official as possible. With our reenactment kit, it is very strict. The material we use, the stitching we use, has got to be exactly right. I mentioned one of the people in our company, Alex Kane, who's written a book on colonial clothing. He is the expert, and he sends me articles, sometimes 2 a week, on new research that he has found out about colonial clothing. So our colonial kit is extremely, extremely realistic. I don't know if many of you were on it in 1975. We had our first reenactment, but I mean, we had pretty much black tape as our garters, sometimes around the stalks, and we had sneakers and everything else, so very unofficial. We have now come to learn a lot more about that. We had our haversacks outside the uniform. We now know that they were actually worn inside the jacket. We had many of us without coats, just with vests. We know that they never went out with just vests. They always had their coats on. So over the years, we've learned that the colors that we use. I wear red, and people are always coming up to me saying, "How come you're wearing the color of the red coats?" And I had to point out to them that in reality, that was a very popular color back then for their coats. And so we researched that very much. We have the tailor, who is also tremendously knowledgeable about the uniform of the day, the material that was used, the stitching that was used. So now, I'm not telling you she hand stitches everything. I will tell you that we have at least two members of our company that will not wear a uniform unless it is hand stitched. They are that picky about the uniform. And I applaud them for it, because I think it's pretty amazing. I'll tell you, I could never do it, so mine is not hand-stitched, but everything about it other than that is very realistic. Yes, Pat?
Any reason why you still have a crochet?
Did we know what the original, where this came from?
Breastplate.
What's that?
Breastplate.
It's a holdover from the knights in shining armor.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. This was a throat plate to protect the throat, and it's exactly what it is. It's a hangover. Now it is ornamental, and it was ornamental back then. But it was originally it was a holdover from the Middle Ages, when the knights had throat protectors, throat protectors.
Does it signify, that you're the company?
This does. You can't read it, but it does say Captain Commanding on this one. The people who wear this are myself. My executive officer has one that says executive officer, and all the past captains have a smaller one that says past captain on it. Those are the only ones in the company that have the gorgets. Yes.
Are the ribbons your ribbons from the military?
These are my Air Force ribbons, yes. Yeah, these are my Air Force ribbons, yeah. And actually, not all there along my oak leaves have fallen off over the years. I got to get them back again. And that's why this is not an official uniform, because we put modern accoutrements on it as well.
So tell us about your character, Francis Brown.
I will do that. Francis Brown, very interesting character. Everyone knows where Wilson Farms is. That was Francis Brown's estate back then. Does everyone know that every single person was a farmer back then? Everybody, that was their primary job, was a farmer. Everybody was a farmer. They had secondary jobs because in the wintertime, for instance, they couldn't farm. So some of them made horseshoes, some of them made buggy belts, buggy whips. It was an assortment of things. And most of the trades were barters. They had these large ledger books, which is where we get a lot of our information. Exchanged 5 apples for 3 musket balls or something like that. And everything was done on a chart, and they kept track of everything that way. But Francis Brown had a very, very large farm back where Wilson Farm is, and his tavern is still there. And probably many of you have passed it many, many times. There is a sign out in front that says the Brown's Tavern, but probably have never noticed that it was there. And it's pretty much on the corner of Pleasant Street, and it's on Mass Ave. It's on the corner of Pleasant Street and Mass Avenue. Next time you go by that, just take a look to your right as you pass Pleasant Street, and you'll see the placard out there identifying Brown's Tavern. So he was a tavern owner at the time. There were a lot of taverns back then, because that was really where everything happened. Besides the drinking, and there was a lot of drinking, okay? As you know, they didn't drink water. They couldn't drink the water. The water was unsafe. So they had different varying levels of alcohol that they would have. Even the children would have a little bit of alcohol in whatever they drank, for safety reasons. But Francis Brown was an interesting character because he fought in the French-Indian War, like I said before, and he was a sergeant in Captain Parker's company. And on the evening of April 19th, he was the one who really pretty much was the alarm for the rest of the Minutemen in the company. He woke up Sergeant Monroe, as a matter of fact. He woke up most of the other Minutemen and spread the alarm to them. And he was also the one who escorted Adams and Hancock to Woburn. He was given that job to escort them to Woburn safely before the Redcoats arrived. And it was shortly after, and then he returned and was president of the Green when the Redcoats arrived. But his claim to fame is that on the afternoon battle, Parker's Revenge, and think of that for a second. You've lost 10% of your population of able-bodied men. Omaha Beach lost 7%. So think of the amount of angst that must have committed in the entire community. For them to come to a man together and say, we are going to march out and meet the regulars on their retreat back from Boston, to have that gumption was just, to me, was almost more amazing than their assembling on the Green in the morning. So that's exactly what happened. After the battle, after they dealt with the dead and the wounded, they marched out again and met the British just inside Lincoln. If everybody is wondering where that is, and there's an interesting story about that, it's behind the Minuteman National Park. There's a plaque there and a rocky ridge, and we've since come to understand that that's not where they were. We did, the Lexington Minutemen were the primary movers and shakers in the archaeological dig that we just had out in Minuteman National Park. And what we found was pretty amazing. We found an actual line, 2 lines of fire where we found musket balls in almost an exact little arc. You could almost place the Minutemen and the British on that time. And it is about 50 yards, looking at the rocks, 50 yards to the left of that, where we feel they really were standing. And there is a little bit of a rise there also, so we understand why they were talking about a rise in the area. But anyways, they assembled at that point, not in the one that is identified now, and the park is going to correct that, by the way. They're going to make the changes on that. They assembled at that point, and at that point, it was one of the largest actual standing firing that had occurred on their entire retreat. And it was at that time that he received a musket ball in the cheek and actually lodged in his, behind his ear. So you think of that, it must have been pretty low velocity to have actually not exited from behind there. The only thing I can think of, and it's not verified, is that it was either a ricochet or it was fired maybe by not somebody that was in that close line, but there were other troops, there was flanking troops too. He was maybe fired by one of the flanking troops that, much further away that caused the damage. But he held that musket ball in his ear for, in his neck for a year, and finally had it removed about a year later. Yes, Pat?
How many men were there at Parker's Revenge?
It was the rest of Parker's company, so it would have been probably about 60 to 70 men. Yeah.
Just an aside, the Cronin lecture on April 29th
Mm-hmm.
at the depot will be on the latest, I think, better check this out.
I would really recommend that you go to that. This is the latest on what they found out at the
Yeah,
Parker's Revenge site.
yeah.
Yeah. Very, very interesting information they found out. I actually have walked it. I went out there and we walked, and actually helped clear the land for that part of the archaeological dig. Many of our company did it. Like I said, we were the lead company in that. We were the ones who started the project, and it's become a national project. We had probably the preeminent archaeological historian in charge of the dig in Lexington for that. And a lot of very, very interesting information. So that's a great point. It's a great lecture to listen to. And it's free. Can't beat it. Can't beat that. Any other questions about that? Yes.
How many men were actually on the green when you come?
Well, again, that's debatable. We have, I think, 80 so far, but like I said, we have several in the pipeline that we think we may have to add to the monument. They're all in the monument. You can count them.
Now, how many British troops?
800. Yeah. It was like 10 to 1. We were outnumbered like 10 to 1. That's why one of the Minutemen, just as they arrived in the green, says, "It's folly to stand here. There are too many of them." Now, again, remember, Captain Parker surely was not anticipating a confrontation that was going to result in gunfire at the time. There have been many such confrontations prior to this on the green in many other communities, and in every single one of them, they had dispersed quietly. Okay. I will say that this was a little bit different. This is why Lexington, I think, is a little bit different than other towns. The anxiety level was probably as high as you could probably get, and it just took that little spark. They were worried that they were worried for Sam Adams and Hancock. They were worried about them going and capturing the ammunition stores in Concord. There was a reason why. Some people say that Parker thought it might have been a delaying tactic, might have used it as a delaying tactic to prevent them from getting into Concord and recovering all the powder and cannon. We don't really know 100% what all of the reasons were, but we do know that how things turned out in the end. Any other? Yes.
A question on the reenactment uniform.
Mm-hmm.
For your characters, what weapons did you carry? Did you carry brown vest?
Brown vest or Charleville.
And a sword or anything else?
Sometimes I go out with a sword and sometimes I don't. We don't know whether Parker had we think Parker had a musket. So I field with a musket. There's one thing about him going inside after he's conversed with Thaddeus Brown, going inside Buckman to grab his musket. We actually do portray that. We actually portray him going back inside to grab my musket before heading onto the common. But as an officer, he would have carried a sword. Yeah.
I thought your character was a sergeant or something.
No, I'm sorry, Captain Parker. Right now, I'm Captain Parker. So I am not Sergeant Brown. While I'm captain, the tradition is that once you've assumed the role of Captain Parker, you become Captain Parker for the reenactment. So that's where the misunderstanding is. Right. So once my role or my captaincy is up, which is this year, I will go back to being Sergeant Francis Brown.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
Sergeant Brown live?
He did. He did. In fact, it's very interesting. When you look at the history of all these men, you look at all the biographies that have been done by the members, how many of them served on the Committee of Correspondence? How many of them became selectmen? How many of them became ministers afterwards? They all assumed leadership roles in the town, almost to a man. So it was almost as if, you don't know whether the experience was enough to make them take on these leadership roles, or whether they were leaders in themselves to start with. But yeah, he did live. Yeah. In fact, I traced his family still living in Lexington, descendants, up until 1930, and then I lost all trace of it. Interestingly enough, in the last month, I have had a slew of emails from descendants of the Brown family. And I have been slowly categorizing it all. I'm going to have to add it to my characterization online. So, and many people have had that. We had the 2 descendants from the Bowman's family attend our annual meeting last year. Our annual meeting is held in April, just before the battle at Buckman Tavern, and we all attend that in kit. So we all attend. It's kind of like a dress rehearsal for us, except we don't do the battle. And we had the 2 members from the Bowman family last year. Members of the Harrington family have appeared in town. People that I've talked to, the Browns, so they plan on coming next year. It's fun. Yes?
I want to, not a question.
Yeah?
I want to thank you very much for walking us through 240 years of American history.
Thank you.
It's a glorious history.
Thank you.
And I would like to say that every morning when I put up my flag, I still salute it and I say, thank you for our freedom.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah. It all started here. So again, we have something a lot to be very, very proud of. Yes.
Question, the reenactment of the battle in Tower Park,
Yep.
which is a great feature of the celebration. Is there any historical?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That is where the British were reinforced. They say they were reinforced someplace inside the Lexington line. And so that does have some significance. That the Tower Park just happens to be in kind of the right spot for that battle. So it does have some significance. Now, is it exactly like that? No, not at all. But they did regroup. They did if they had not come, if they had not been gotten reinforcements, they would have been wiped out to a man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Speaking of that, how did they get word back to the British Army that they needed help?
Oh, they had riders. They still had riders, and they knew what was happening when they maybe an hour after the battle of Lexington Cunha, they knew exactly what was happening, and he sent Colonel Smith sent reinforcements out immediately. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. Okay, I appreciate it.
And thank you, Barry. Wasn't that fun? It's great. A quick preview of next month on Monday, May 9, another talk about a naval historic sea battle. And you remember when Bob Lewis talked about the hunt for the Bismarck, there wasn't an empty chair in the room. So next month it's The Riddle of Jutland, the Battle of Jutland, by Ron Rosenthal, who has talked to us before. It's going to be a wonderful program. See you then. Thank you very much for coming. Bye-bye.